Addiction. Addiction is what led me to vape. I should say, addiction is what led me to smoke originally. But smoking addiction is what led me to vape. And I guess I'm using this as just a pretty simple example of an addiction. And the question of what addiction is has changed over the years. Addiction is not a brain chemistry change that makes a person an addict merely because they've consumed a certain substance. When I was growing up, they tell you, hey, if you do heroin for a month, you're going to be addicted. And earlier I watched a show that really put it into a better perspective. Maybe I'll post a link to it if I can find it. It was about the truth about addiction and how, back in the 60s or whatnot, somebody put a rat in a cage with a bottle of heroin-laced water or cocaine and a bottle of plain water. And usually within days, the rat would drink the doped-up water and end up overdosing and killing themselves. So the assumption was if a person's given drugs, then they will consume them and become addicted and die. It was a very bad connection. Another guy did an experiment in the 70s, and he, this time, made the place much more enjoyable. He called it Rat Park, and he put in all these balls and tunnels and everything, and had several rats to play with each other, and once again gave them the two waters. Hardly any of the rats chose the drugged water, and none of the rats died or overdosed. What this showed is that the addiction to substances, and I'm talking hardcore drugs, all substances, are like this. They're kind of an escape, if you will. And most addicts know this, but it's not just addiction to substances. It can be drugs or food, or it can be an addiction to porn. It can be an addiction to the internet, or just to Googling things, or going on Facebook. And what they found is that the addictions are not caused by the substances themselves. They're caused by the lack of external comfort and support, family support usually. The rats that were in the cage with other rats had people, friends. They had things to do. One of the most revealing studies was after the Vietnam War, when I guess 10% or 20% of all soldiers were doing heroin, and everybody was afraid when they came home that it was just going to be chaos, junkies walking around everywhere. And the fact is, very, very few people remained heroin addicts. Over 95%, I believe, just quit when they got home. And it showed that heroin wasn't the addiction. The heroin was caused by the environment that they were in. Once they were back in with their families and support and love, it wasn't an issue anymore, and they just quit. The other example they used was how there are thousands of people in hospitals receiving heroin, dimorphine, every day for various, broken hips and bones and problems. They can be in the hospital for 2 months, loaded up on morphine, and the minute they get out, they just leave. They're not addicted, they're not hooked, they're not junkies, they don't go through withdrawals. This is because, your body can go through a physical withdrawal, but generally they're not so bad if your environment is proper. The addiction's not going to continue after you don't need it anymore. These are very interesting findings, because one of the most revealing and important things about this was that we're putting people in prison for drugs, and this has always bothered me. What you're doing is you're going back and you're taking a person who already has a problem with drugs and you're putting them in that rat cage. That first rat cage, without friends, without any family or support, and then expecting them to get better, when it's in fact making them 10 times worse. I think we're learning this, and I think over time we will start to treat addiction differently and realize that when we see somebody who's a junkie, instead of kicking them to the curb and saying, screw you, get out of this society, that we support them, that we help them find a job, that we help them understand more about how they can help the world so they can help themselves. Nobody wants to be an addict. Nobody wants to live as a junkie. Now, this is a very weak example of an addiction. This is just nicotine. This is a compulsive addiction, which doesn't get you high, but it's caused by the same needs, that yearning for something. I sucked my thumb when I was a kid, and I always had my little blankie. And so is this any different from that, really? I've come to terms with my addictions. I don't consume so much that I can't think. I smoke marijuana, and I do take psychedelics a couple times a year, and then I vape. but that's pretty much it. I take my various herbal mixtures and create them, but I don't take anything that puts me out of my current state of mind to where I'm trying to leave my problems, because that's just impossible. I can't. And I think we all know that. I guess my point here is that, nobody just wants to leave society and be a fucking heroin junkie for the rest of their life. People don't want to be hooked on these things. Short term, they may think they do, but in the long term, people want help and they want support. So if you know somebody who's an addict, if you know somebody who's having problems, don't make the mistake of just pushing them away. I had a friend who was a big-time addict. He was having serious problems, and I just basically abandoned him because of it. I've done that to a couple of people because I didn't want to be associated and involved in their problems, because they were causing problems for themselves, getting in trouble, driving high. But the whole time, all they needed was friends and support. So when I run into that again, I'm going to support them as much as I possibly can, because pushing someone away just makes the addiction worse. It doesn't give them time to think or figure things out. It just allows them to sit in their delusion and stew in it. So I urge people to help one another out, to not call people junkies or dopers or make fun of a person because they're an addict, but to have a little bit of respect and understand that people are people, and everybody wants to be treated the same way. We just need love to do it, and a little bit of a community and a feeling of bonding, and addictions will drop away. So take care, everybody.